We peer so suspiciously at each other that we cannot see that we Canadians are standing on the mountaintop of human wealth, freedom, and privilege. Those were the words of former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in a speech in December of 1980, 3 years before I was born. Hey, I'm Ajay Fry, and welcome to Mistakes Were Made, the podcast about making mistakes and also hopefully learning from them. Today is election day for my fellow 37 million or so Canadians, so I'll keep this episode brief to afford you some time to get out there to be an active participant in our democracy. Our democracy. While folks all over the world continue to fight for theirs, we should really pause to recognize and appreciate the mountaintop that we do stand upon within ours. I'd like to tell you about the last time Canadians took part in the democratic process. 4 years ago, in fact, in 2015, we chose a new leader, Justin Trudeau, and his federal Liberal Party. Now, I suppose it was a mistake to say we because I didn't vote for Justin Trudeau. I did make a deal with him, though, and I'll get to that in a bit, but saying we when referring to Canadians as though it was all of us who voted for JT and his Liberals is wrong. Very wrong. It was nowhere near all of us, not even half of us, in fact. Just 39% of the Canadians who actually voted did so for a local Liberal candidate. The remaining 61% of voters would have preferred a different government altogether, and yet the Liberals got a majority of the seats in the House of Commons, and with it, the ability to deliver all of their campaign promises. Within Canada, if your party forms a majority government, it is much easier to enact your proposed policies. In fact, according to an article in the National Post summarizing a report on Trudeau's time as Prime Minister prepared by dozens of policy academics, yada, 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 Trudeau's government had entirely followed through on about half of the pledges and partially delivered on about 40% and had broken the remaining 10% of promises so far. And it's one of those broken promises that has me and the rest of the country frustrated heading out to vote today. Here's a clip from the CBC featuring Justin Trudeau speaking at a campaign event back in 2015.
We are committed to ensuring that the 2015 election will be the last federal election using first past the post.
Spoiler, it wasn't. Electoral reform was quickly brushed aside, and here we are again using the first-past-the-post system to elect our new federal members of parliament and prime minister. So why did he decide not to deliver on some kind of electoral reform? Well, in February of 2017, he gave a 7-minute answer to a question about the broken promise. He begins by at least acknowledging that he'd made the promise explicitly and that a majority of Canadians support some form of electoral reform, and that while he still feels it's important, he's wary that doing so in the wrong way could lead to division within Canada. Here's what he ended with.
Because I felt that it was not in the best interest of our country or of our future that I turned my back on that promise. And I know people will be disappointed, but this was my choice to make, and I chose to make it with full consequence of the cost that is possibly going to come to it, but I will not compromise on what is in the best interest of Canada. That's what Canadians elected me for.
Cool story, bro. Way to obtain power by promising to divest it upon arrival, only to have a change of heart afterwards. Maybe you should have thought about it or investigated the right way to do it before making it into a campaign promise. If you're like me, with at least a decent understanding of all the different ways in which fair and democratic elections can be held, you'll understand why this particular broken promise is so egregious. If you're a little confused as to what electoral reform might be like, I encourage you to watch the short videos from CGP Grey on YouTube. You'll quickly come to understand why our current first-past-the-post system is, while democratic, far from the best option for maintaining a healthy democracy and delivering governments that actually represent the will of the people. Anyway, remember that deal that I mentioned making with Trudeau? Back in 2015, when he promised that if elected, he would deliver on electoral reform, I was skeptical. It turns out, rightfully so. Now, I'd never voted Liberal before, and I wasn't about to then either, but I did vow that if he won and he actually delivered on the promise of electoral reform, be it ranked ballot, STV, or MMP, or something to prevent the need for strategic voting, as a thank you, I would actually reward him with my vote in the 2019 election. But here we are once again, and rather than supporting my local Liberal candidate, I'm going to vote for my guest on last week's episode of Mistakes Were Made, Hannah Conover's Arthur, my local Green Party candidate because, or should I say Hannah Conover Arthur's, my local Green Party candidate because I like supporting the underdog, especially when the underdog is the only dog in the park telling the other dogs to stop fighting about which trees to pee on and instead to focus on the fact that all the trees are fucking dying. I apologize for my language there, but I was really hoping that we could all be a little bit more hopeful with our votes this time around. It's actually not really going to affect me personally here in the riding of Davenport. We haven't had a Conservative MP here since 1962, so I can vote for the Green Party knowing there isn't a chance that someone who really doesn't appreciate or share my values will wind up representing me on the federal level. But many Canadians are going to be stuck voting for a party and candidate who don't best represent their values just to prevent someone who really doesn't represent their values from winning and representing them. And if you're unsure of who to vote for in your riding, just to ensure that it does count towards keeping progressive values represented at the federal level, you can visit strategicvoting.ca to learn which progressive candidate in your riding has the best chance of winning. Thanks for listening to Mistakes Were Made. I may change up the day that these episodes are released on, and I'm still looking for your feedback and comments as to ways that I can improve my podcast. Please send me any and all comments or criticisms. I'm Ajay Fry on all the social things. Thanks for listening. Get out there and vote, and I'll see you in the future.